Alright, what's going on, guys? I assume you've read the title of the video by now, and before you go down in the comment section and comment, well, I don't like robots, let me explain a few things first. I've been playing Armored Core 6 for almost 3 days straight now, and as a die-hard Souls fan, with almost no experience in the Armored Core series except a few hours in Armored Core 5, I can say with almost 100% certainty, Armored Core 6 is going to be my game of the year. This game is incredible, and I'm hearing the opinion a lot, especially on my own channel, since we do primarily cover games like Elden Ring, that many of the Souls fans out there are skipping it because it's not a Souls game. And in a year with a lot of phenomenal game releases, I understand if you're less willing to spend the money. However, if you are one of those people, I want to urge you to reconsider, because as it stands, you're missing out on one of the best games FromSoftware has ever created. So what I want to do today is show you the reasons why you'll probably like Armored Core 6, even though you think you might not. Because the DNA that makes up this game is FromSoftware through and through. And I'll show you what I mean. And for those of you that are hesitant, of course know this is not a Souls game whatsoever, and you'll especially feel that in the first chapter of the game. For a while at the beginning, it does introduce you to the mechanical side of things, reinforcing the fact that you are piloting a machine, you're using guns and missiles, and while there are other characters in the game, everything is told through machines. And so when FromSoftware has accumulated a fan base from a decade of fantasy RPGs, it's understandable how jarring it is to suddenly expect them to play a mech sci-fi. But if we set aside the playstyle of the way your character moves in Elden Ring, pretty much everything else that you loved about that game will be felt in AC6. And let's start by talking about the boss fights. These are some of the most insane bosses I've ever fought in a FromSoftware game. The amount of things that are happening at once is almost impossible to keep up with. In the way that Elden Ring took boss fights to a higher level than the Dark Souls series, these are almost double in the amount that's required of you as the player than what Elden Rings were. The pattern recognition is still there, the bosses will still mostly telegraph their attacks, and it's your job to manage all of the systems at once, predict what's going to happen, and adapt and overcome. And that is essentially the FromSoftware signature, that high skill requirement where you must master the game you're playing with that extreme difficulty, but always being fair. And I gotta say, every single boss in this game has felt that way, demanding absolutely everything of me as the player, and giving me that extremely satisfying adrenaline rush whenever I finally did overcome the boss. And that is, at its core, no pun intended, one of the main reasons I love FromSoftware's games. It's having that insurmountable wall, but finding the experience and strength as the player to surmount it. For example, Balteus is one of the first bosses in the game, and it is without a doubt one of the hardest bosses FromSoftware has ever created. And he's kind of like how Margit was for Elden Ring, where it's that first real skill check of the game, and for me personally, it took around 50 tries to finally beat. And by the time I did, I had one of the biggest feelings of satisfaction that I hadn't felt since playing Elden Ring for the first time. And it's just super cool to see other people's reactions like that online, because you really don't see this in any kind of game besides the ones FromSoftware makes. And once again, Armored Core 6 is not a Souls game, but that familiarity is very much still alive. Next, we need to talk about the story of the game, because this is also something that follows FromSoftware's typical behavior. And if you were to be on the outside looking in, simply looking at reviews for the game, you'd likely be led to believe that the game doesn't really have a story to it, and it's just action for the sake of action. And that's what I originally thought it was going to be as well. But even though the majority of exposition is told through mission briefings, there's actually an incredibly rich lore here. Tons of subtle little hints and an expansive world, the nature of which I was questioning the entire time I was playing. It makes me want to learn about the history of Rubicon, about what coral actually is, and how it affected not only the planet, but the people it comes in contact with. But like Elden Ring and every other FromSoftware game that came before, to actually get those questions answered is going to take a community-wide investigation. But on top of the really intriguing world building we have going on here, the characters themselves, although we never see them, make you question everything. They speak to you in the briefings and have conversations with each other, and you can kind of tell while all this is going on, nobody's really saying their true feelings. And while on paper, only having the audio of characters sounds incredibly boring, since you never actually see anybody face to face, it honestly had me hooked. And I was mad anytime I missed a line of dialogue, because I really wanted to know what was happening and get some answers to my questions. There are also occasional missions where you'll go out and find logs, scanning bits of wreckage or dead ACs, and you'll get little lore tabs that accompany it. And conveniently, since most of the game is so fast paced, they did include an archive in the main menu that you can go back and read from anytime. But the way the story is told is in typical FromSoftware fashion, where if you are a Souls veteran or are familiar with FromSoftware games, then you're someone that will be able to pick it up and ask the right questions that it presents. So I wouldn't take the opinion of the uninitiated when it comes to the story story in this game, simply because its delivery is obtuse by nature, and that's what we as Souls fans know. Once you start to read between the lines and consider what's actually going on in the action you're doing, there is a very investing story here. Now, one of the primary selling points of Armored Core is the customization, which captures that same build crafting feeling that we got from the Souls RPG formula. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try to compare the two because they are vastly different, and in Armored Core 6, you don't want to be married to one specific build, but what I do want to drive home is that feeling of creativity, where your build is your own. And that was something I really appreciated about Elden Ring specifically, was the vast amount of builds you could create, and that almost immeasurable freedom to do so. And with Elden Ring, that creativity compared to a lot of other RPGs on the market was far superior. And the reason I say that is because, again, it's that same feeling that's captured in Armored Core, only amplified quite a bit this time around. It's really hard to describe other things that draw this similarity for me, because there is a magic that makes up FromSoftware games, but it's through a lot of intangibles. And one thing that Armored Core is doing very well to hit that same feeling is scale, a lot like Elden Ring did, where things are just massive. Even though you're piloting a giant robot, you constantly feel like an ant under the giant scale of the world. But it's never just simply because things are big, it's also because FromSoftware has a tendency to make things weird. But you won't really feel this in AC6 until about halfway through the second chapter. And to me, all the cutscenes kind of hit the same as well. Maybe it's because it's also in the Elden Ring engine, and a lot of the camera angles and pans felt similar. But there's always just that undescribable feeling in the back of my head that I'm playing a FromSoftware game, and it kind of captures that same atmosphere that Elden Ring did, at least for me. And I'm curious if others feel that way as well. Overall, I just had to talk about this, because I know so many people out there are passing on this game simply because it doesn't have Souls in the title, and doesn't play exactly the same as the Souls games. Because when you look at it from that angle, you miss out on pretty much everything else that makes those games so good. The satisfaction of combat, the overwhelming but fair boss fights, the hidden and deep lore, the mysterious nature of the world, the magnitude and scale, and that indescribable feeling of magic. All of that is here in almost the exact same way as the Souls games. And I would hate for all these FromSoftware fans to miss out on it because they're looking at it from a reductive angle. Man, I gotta say, it's been really hard to even make this video because I just want to keep playing the game. It's honestly incredible, just like pretty much every FromSoftware game is. Armored Core 6 is not a Souls game whatsoever, but it is a FromSoftware game through and through. But anyways though guys, I just had to come on here and talk about that. That's gonna pretty much do it for the video today. If you enjoyed, please leave a like on it. Let me know down in the comment section if you are playing Armored Core, how are you liking it so far? And if you're new around here, hit that subscribe button. I've got a lot of Armored Core content coming out soon. I really want to dive into the lore of this game. But with all that, I will catch you in the next one.